Good morning, all. Brian S. Pratt here. Going to do a read of Chapter 3 of Jaikus and Reneeke, Join the Guild. A quick recap. Excuse me. Two lads from a small community decided to join the guild. They are realizing it's not as easy as they can, and they discover that they have to do an adventure in order to get in. So they've signed on, or they've agreed to join Jaikus' troop to go into the swamp to accompany and protect Heimel, the apothecary, to doing whatever he's doing. And they're going to sign on as springers. They're not exactly sure what that means. There's Jaikus, of course, is so focused on going on an adventure and being part of the guild that he's just excited about doing it. And how bad can it be, right? Okay, so they met with Charka the night before, or the last evening, and he says that they need to go to a place called the Dirt Road to get supplies for the trip and to meet them at the guild the following morning before they head out. So this is where we are. Jaikus and Reneeke are waking up in the morning and trying to find the dirt road. The following morning, before the sun was barely above the horizon, Jaikus and Reneeke were on their way to find the dirt road and acquire the equipment needed for the impending journey. Jaikus had hardly been able to sleep through the night. So excited had he been at the prospect of embarking upon an adventure with real adventures. Reneeke, on the other hand, had slept the night away. It was easy enough to find Kyoto Plaza. It comprised the open area before the gate leading to the swamp. The wall had been built some time after the troll invasion, mostly to keep the trolls and other creatures of the swamp from wandering into town and creating a ruckus, but also in part to stem the settling of the swamp. Newcomers to Rekla, who staked a claim within the swamp, often came up missing a short time afterward. There were more than trolls inhabiting the swamp, though trolls were by and large the most common creatures encountered, so the wall had been built. It stood over 15 feet high, with a platform running along the inner lip where members of the city guard patrolled to keep watch for any creatures that might wander too close. When one was spotted, they notified the guild, who then dispatched members to either kill it or, more preferably, capture the creature and bring it back to the guild's pens beneath its grounds. Though the plaza was bordered by many shops, it was a simple matter to find the dirt road. Within, they discovered Bella, who had to be one of the tallest people either of them had ever met. Standing easily a head and a half taller than Reneeke, the man practically towered over them. Either he was a tall human or a small giant, which was hard to tell. He looked every bit the human, though around the eyes he had a slightly different build. Later, they would discover he was half ice giant, half human. How such a thing came to be was something Bella had never fully explained to anyone. "Ah, welcome, sirs," boomed a voice as deep as the deepest cave. Jaikus said to tell you we need the regular supplies. Do you know what he meant?" Jaikus stammered. Being in the presence of such a tall person made him feel small and slightly unnerved him. "Ah, yes. If you will but wait a moment, I shall gather your items." "Thank you," Reneeke said. They watched as Bella accumulated a pile of goods upon the counter: ropes, blankets, bedrolls, 2 sacks bulging with dried beef and hardtack, as well as a dozen other items useful for camping in the open. He also added 2 bundles of 6 torches each. When the tall man placed 2 large, finely woven mesh nets upon the stack, Reneeke asked him about them. "They keep the bugs off you at night," Bella explained. "The swamp is full of little nasties that come out once the sun goes down." Once the items had been accumulated, he glanced at Jaikus' newest companions. "I take it you will also need packs sufficiently large to carry all this?" Jaikus nodded. "If you please." Bella shrugged and produced 2 large backpacks, laying them atop the pile. "There you go." "Don't we need to sign something?" Reneeke asked. "No, Jaikus will take care of it next time he comes in." They came to the counter and each took a backpack and filled it. Not completely familiar with that particular style of backpack, Bella had to instruct them in the proper placing of items so as to get it all to fit. Some were intended to attach to the outside, such as the bedroll and blanket, once they were rolled to the proper size. You tell Charka that if he comes across any pyrostones, that I have a buyer and will give him 2 golds each. We'll do that, Jaikus agreed. With pack fully loaded, he slung it on his back. Reneeke did the same. You boys take care of yourselves, the chandler cautioned as the two left the shop. This is heavy, Jaikus groaned. It's not bad. I'm sure you will get used to it. Making their way through the streets, they reached the guild a couple hours before the appointed time when they were to meet Charka. They moved down from the entrance away so as not to be in the way while they waited. After removing their packs and leaning them against the side of the guild, they sat on the ground beside them. Wonder what a pyrostone is, Reneeke asked after they were settled. I don't know, Jaikus replied. Who cares? Do you think maybe they have something to do with magic? Quite likely, Rennie. An hour went by, and Jaikus was growing impatient for the arrival of Charka and the adventure to begin. Unable to simply sit and wait any longer, he started pacing back and forth. Relax, his friend said. They will be here when they do. I know, Renee. I just hate having to wait. I want to get going. Reneeke shook his head and sighed. For as long as he had known Jaikus, his friend had always been impatient. When he wanted something, he wanted it right then. During his pacus, Jaikus' attention continued roving up and down the street, passing before the guild for any sign of Charka. So engrossed was he in scanning the people passing on the street that when a voice seeming to come out of the very air before him boomed, "Watch where you're going, you lout!" he jumped back in startlement. Glancing around, he sought the source of the deep, thunderous voice. "Down here!" rumbled a voice as deep as the mountains. His initial shock quickly gave way to humor when he discovered the owner of the voice to be no more than 1/2 foot in height. Looking for all the world like a miniature human male, dressed in armor, with a mace that couldn't have been more than 2 inches long, hanging from his tiny belt, the little guy stood glaring up at Jaikus with hands on hip. "What the heck are you?" Jaikus chuckled. Not wanting to reply, the little guy demanded, "Step aside." "Hey, Renee," Jaikus said, ignoring the miniature human. "Get a look at this." As Rennie got to his feet and began to walk over, Jaikus turned back to the little guy with an amused grin and saw that all 6 inches of the miniature man was now at eye level, seeming to hover in the air I'm going to say mid-air. Seeming to hover in mid-air. Oh. Face red with anger, the little guy pulled back his arm and struck Jaikus right between the eyes. The blow hit him like a ton of bricks, and Jaikus was knocked backward off his feet. Sailing through the air, he came to land flat on his back in a cloud of death several feet away. Reneeke drew his sword to come to his friend's aid. "I wouldn't do that, lad." Charka and his 2 companions from the night before were approaching from down the street. The man with Charka had 3 mules loaded with supplies and equipment. "But he attacked Jaikus." As the little man stalked off toward the entrance to the Adventurers Guild, Charka shook his head. "If Lord Terratus had seriously meant to attack your friend, he'd be dead. As it was, he was only annoyed." The little guy turned his gaze upon Charka, who nodded his head respectfully. "My lord?" "Who is he?" asked Reneeke. "Someone you don't want to mess with," Charka's lady companion replied. The other man with them merely nodded agreement. Glancing to where Jaikus was slowly regaining consciousness, Charka said, "So, you two are serious about signing on as Springers?" "Yes, sir," said Reneeke. "We have already been to the dirt road and have our supplies." "Excellent." Lending his friend a hand, Reneeke helped Jaikus to his feet. Taking in the man who wore the same leather as the night before, only today had a long sword and shield, and the woman now in a dark blue gown, Jaikus asked, "Is this your troop?" "You bet," Charka affirmed. Gesturing to the lady, he said, "Lady Kate, a magic user of fearsome power." The woman gave them a small smile and bowed her head slightly. Reneeke grinned back. "Nice to meet you, ma'am." And the sour-looking individual next to her is Seward, fighter of modest accomplishments. "Modest? Humph!" The man scowled at Charka, who only grinned. "So what's the mission?" Jaikus asked. "We'll tell you that once we're in the swamp," Charka replied. "After we take care of some business here, we'll meet our patron near the gate." Jaikus looked at the troop leader with skepticism. "What business?" Before we begin, you and your friend must sign contracts stating that you are coming along as springers. It's standard practice. That way, when we return, I can put you forward for guild membership. Reneeke looked at Jaikus. What do we have to lose? Exactly. Where do we sign? Going to one of his mules, Charka pulled out a piece of parchment covered with writing. At the bottom were 5 lines. Just sign your name on one of those, and I'll do the same. Then Seward will take it to the guild clerk, and we can be on our way. Producing a quill and a small vial of ink, he offered them to Jaikus. After only giving the parchment a very cursory examination, Jaikus readily signed his name. Then, giving the quill to Reneeke, he waited while his friend gave the contract a more thorough once-over. Duties of a Springer as set forth in Guild Bylaw 12, Mutual Pact of Defense and Rescue, proper burial if body can be recovered. Proper burial? He asked, glancing up from the contract. It simply means that we won't leave you to rot in the swamp if we can help it. Why would you not be able to help it? Jaikus asked. Situations where you are eaten or dragged to the bottom of the swamp. Such occurrences make it difficult to recover the body for burial. Just sign it, Jaikus urged. Not seeing anything indicating lifelong servitude or extended indebtedness, he signed. Charka took the parchment, signed, and then handed it to Seward. We'll meet you at the gate. Seward merely nodded. Then as he headed for the guild's entrance, Charka had them grab their packs and follow him to Kyoto Plaza. A man waited for them there, the reins of his pack horse held in hand. Rather nondescript, and one who would easily blend into a crowd, Charka introduced him as Heimel the apothecary. Heimel took in the 2 newcomers with a raised eyebrow. More springers? He asked. After the last time, I thought you had given up on them. Charka shrugged. I had, but they volunteered. To be springers? Heimel shook his head. Jaikus frowned as he followed their discourse. What was wrong with being springers? He thought. Good to see you again, Lady Kate. A pleasure, Master Heimel. I don't see Seward. He's at the guild taking care of their springer contracts, explained Charka. He should be along shortly. They waited another 10 minutes for Seward to arrive, during which Jaikus and Reneeke exchanged questioning glances, wondering just what they may have gotten themselves into. When Seward finally arrived, he and Heimel exchanged silent nods, then Charka announced it was time to go. The gate through which one gained access to the swamp was merely 10 feet wide, barely sufficient to allow a wagon to pass through, though such occurrences rarely happened anymore. Once in a while, a local might forage the fringe of the swamp under the watchful eyes of the guards atop the wall for firewood, herbs, and other things the swamp provided. But by and large, the only ones to pass through the gate were adventuring parties such as Charka's troop. At their approach, the guards entered the gatehouse and threw the lever, unlocking the gates. Then another pair pushed the gate open to allow the party to pass. What met them on the other side was not what Jaikus had been expecting. Thinking to find marshland, dead trees, and bogs, he instead discovered a lush growth of vibrant vegetation that started 200 feet or so from the wall. Trees soared high, bushes were full, all being very much what one would find anywhere. Good luck, Charka, one guard hailed. See you in a couple weeks. The troop leader waved in reply as he led the troop forward. Directly before the gate, in the midst of the foliage, was the beginning of a trail that wound its way deeper into the swamp. Upon reaching the trailhead, Charka paused and turned back to his 2 springers. From this point on, our lives are dependent on each other. Keep silent. Do what we tell you, and you'll live to again see Rekla. Give us trouble, and we'll dump your bodies in the nearest bog, Seward mumbled beneath his breath. Charka gave him a silencing glare. You can count on us, sir, Jaikus assured him. Reneeke nodded. Good. Now stay close. Master Heimel, you're behind me, then Kate. Seward, take the rear. The man merely nodded and moved to place himself and the mules behind Reneeke. Entering the swamp was kind of anticlimactic for Jaikus. The night before, he imagined having to battle their way through hordes of trolls, ghouls, and other nightmarish creatures with which his overactive imagination had filled the swamp. But, now that the moment was upon him, he had to admit this was much preferable. Once they were upon the trail and the wall was no longer visible through the swamp's undergrowth and trees, Lady Kate moved to walk next to Jaikus. Don't let Seward's mood bother you. He's always a bit sour after a night of hard drinking. Charka doesn't allow more than a single pint to be consumed a day, and the night before any adventure, Seward goes a little overboard. We won't, ma'am, Jaikus assured her. Please, call me Kate. Such formalities have no place in the swamp. There will be more important things to worry about than titles. From behind, they heard Seward snort. Not for a day or two, there won't. Haven't encountered a troll or bog beast this close to the wall in over 2 years. Still, we must be wary. Kate, how long will it take to go wherever it is we are going? Reneeke questioned. It takes about 4 days to reach our destination. Then it will take a full day to poke around before starting the return trip. What is our purpose? Your purpose is to act as springers, of course. The troop's purpose is to see Master Heimel safely to his destination and back. We've made this trips many times with him. For the most part, it's pretty boring. We don't venture too deeply into the swamp, and the worst of its denizens don't wander the fringe area. Master Heimel is going to a place older than Rekla, where some of the most precious and hard-to-come-by reagents for spells and potion making can be found. We humans were not the first race to inhabit this region. You can find ruins of an ancient people scattered throughout the swamp area, even 2 points beyond. Who were they? Jaikus asked. She shrugged. We don't know, and if Heimel does, he isn't telling. He calls the place where we're going Scythel. It's an ancient city of a long-ago race. Most of it has been swallowed by the swamp, but there are some buildings readily accessible from the surface. You mean we get to scrounge around for treasure? Jaikus grew excited at the prospect. Lady Kate nodded. That's part of the bargain. We escort him to Scythel, and in return, we get a full day to root around on our own and see what we can find. I bet there is lots of treasure simply waiting to be discovered. True, but we don't always find it. Some trips are quite profitable, while others are a bust. Charka glanced over his shoulder. Quiet! The way you are carrying on, we'll have every troll in the vicinity coming this way to see what fools were nice enough to place themselves on the menu. There aren't any in this part of the swamp, Seward stated. Are you willing to bet my life on that? Staring his man down, Charka dared him to continue. Seward had the good sense to remain silent. Okay, then. We'll talk later, Lady Kate whispered. Charka shot her a warning-filled look. She merely gave him a grin. Man, we are going to be rich, he quietly exclaimed to Reneeke, who shrugged. We don't have it yet, his friend asserted. No, but we will. Okay, I gotta make that instead of he. It's gotta be Jaikus. Yeah, Jaikus quietly exclaimed to Reneeke, who shrugged. We don't have it yet. Reneeke, he's always the pragmatist, right? Jaikus, man, all he think. Ooh, ruins. Okay, I'm gonna get me a new sword there. Probably maybe a wand. Maybe armor that's like +5. Who knows? The rest of the first day in the swamp continued to be routine as the trail they had originally followed gradually disappeared until vanishing altogether. Evening found them beginning to see changes in the swamp as it turned from lush, verdant land to the quagmire/bog-infested place one would expect of a swamp. Master Heimel and Charka often conferred as to the best way to proceed. For the most part, the apothecary was content to allow Charka to determine their route. That seemed strange to Jaikus, since Lady Kate had earlier told him how Heimel was the only one who knew the location. Curious, but not enough to ask, Jaikus was satisfied to follow wherever they led. He was on an adventure, and there was going to be treasure. Visions of shimmering swords and piles of gold occupying his mind until they reached their first campsite. Now, true, Heimel is the only one who knows the way there, but Lady Kate says that they've been there several times. So the initial part of the journey, Charka probably knows very well. And the other part, maybe Heimel has to help them along. The campsite was atop a knoll of dry ground rising above the bog. Insects buzzed and drove them crazy until wood was collected and a fire built in a ring of stones that had seen use as a fire ring many times before. Charka instructed them to put green or even damp foliage onto the fire. The smoke produced by the less than dry fuel kept the insects down to merely an annoyance. Make sure the fire burns throughout the night, Charka ordered to his newest companions. If the flame dies, we'll have visitors. Trolls? Reneeke asked. He nodded. Trolls, bog beasts, swamp bats, and others even more unpleasant. Gather more fuel, but stay close. If you see or hear anything strange, return to the camp immediately. And don't shout, Seward added. That only encourages the beasties to attack. Thank you, Reneeke said. We'll keep that in mind. Then to his friend, let's go, Jake. They spent an hour collecting wood until Charka deemed they had compiled a sufficient supply to see them through the night. By that time, Seward had a stew going that they would be able to share. Save the rations you got from Bella for when we'll need them, Charka explained. They'll last longer than the meat we brought. Thanks, Jaikus said. Charka shrugged. As long as you are part of my troop, you'll be taken care of. It's the least we can do. Seeing as the stew would take a little longer before it was ready, Charka asked to see their swords. I'm assuming they were cheap? Probably from Keeler's back room, Seward guessed. How did you know? Reneeke asked. There isn't any place in all of Rekla where you can find a cheaper blade, Seward explained. At least, none worth staking your life on at any rate. Reneeke pulled his from the scabbard and handed it over. A long exercise in polishing and using the whetstone the night before had removed most of the rusty patches and left the edge moderately sharp. Taking the blade, Charka first eyed down its length, then tested the balance. Moving over to one side of the knoll, he struck the flat of the blade against the side of a great tree whose dead limbs reached up into the sky as if for salvation. It'll do, he stated upon returning the blade to Reneeke. Then he turned to Jaikus. Mine's fine, the Springer said. Visions of his last blade shattering at Keeler's made him nervous to trust this one to Charka. As leader of this troop, it is my responsibility to ensure the safety of each of its members. I cannot allow a member to endanger the rest of us by using a blade that won't last the first passage of arms. Holding out his hand, he said, hand it over. Reneeke nodded for him to do it. Still having mixed feelings about it, he handed him his sword. Then he watched Charka go through the same motions as he had with Reneeke's. Keeler said it would suffice. And so it will, Charka replied, once the ringing of the blade from being struck against the side of the tree faded away. Reclaiming his sword, Jaikus quickly reinserted it back in the scabbard. Not so fast, said Charka. Just because your blades are satisfactory doesn't mean they're good, or that you will be good with them. He then eyed both of them. Those weapons still have a long way to go before they will cleave trollhide. I want the rust off those blades and to have an edge you can shave with before the sun comes up. For the rest of the evening, until the stew was ready, and for a stretch afterward, Charka instructed the lads from Runningbrook on the proper care and maintenance of their swords. Much of the time until they turned in was spent with rag and oil, working to remove the last of the rust. When one would polish, the other would use the whetstone to sharpen. Charka oversaw their efforts until satisfied they were doing it properly. Reneeke was an apt pupil, willing to learn and taking to the task set for him well. Jaikus took to it as well, seeing in the instruction as the means whereby he could become a better swordsman, and thus one step closer to becoming the hero he always longed for. See, this is why new people shouldn't go off alone, because they learn little bitty things that, they didn't think about before that will enable them to survive longer. They took turns on watch that night. Neither of the boys were allowed a turn by themselves. Being new to the troop, Charka wouldn't trust them to go it alone until they'd proven themselves. Reneeke was paired with Charka, while Jaikus had the dissatisfying duty with Seward. When Seward awakened Jaikus to join him in the watch, he did so with a nudge to the side of the ribs. Though nudge was a loose term, his nudge could in some instances have been termed a kick. Wake up, boy. What? Looking around blurry-eyed, Jaikus saw the man standing over him. It's our turn at watch. Jaikus nodded and climbed from his bedroll. Keeping his blanket wrapped tightly around him to ward off the chill, he moved to sit next to the fire. Where do you think you're going? I was going to warm myself by the fire. No, you aren't. We're on watch, boy, and that means we watch. First rule in guard duty, don't look into the fire. It ruins your night vision. Second rule, walk the perimeter and keep alert for any movement or strange noises coming from within the swamp. And third, don't fall asleep. Your life and the lives of us all could well depend on your alertness. Fine. Pulling his blanket even tighter, he moved from the welcoming warmth of the fire to the less hospitable fringe of the knoll. There, he began walking around the dry ground along the bog's edge. As his eyes began scanning the darkness, his ears picked up all sorts of noises that he hadn't been aware of before. A rustle here, the cry of a night creature there. After completing his third circuit around the knoll, it gradually began to unnerve him. Shadows seemed to be everywhere, and perhaps it was only his imagination, but he would catch movement out of the corner of his eye, only to discover that upon turning his full attention toward it, nothing was there. Don't get jumpy, he mumbled to himself. He well remembered Charka's assurance that there were no trolls or other fell beasts in this part of the swamp. But could there be? Back home on the farm, once in a while, one of the mountain beasts would wander down to the plains where they were rarely seen. Perhaps in the swamp, such things could happen too. The snapping of a twig out in the swamp caused him to jump. Hand resting shakily on the hilt of his sword, Jaikus peered into the darkness for what had caused the twig to snap. His heart raced. Could this be it? Could this be when his mettle would first be tested? Then a form emerged from the swamp. "Run!" Seward screamed. Face awash with blood, he fell to his knees before the young adventurer. "Flee for your life!" he shouted before keeling over completely. Jaikus's eyes were wide, and fear rose up inside him like a volcanic eruption. Reaching out to see if Seward was still there, a roar splitting the silence of the swamp forestalled him. Then the huge form of a troll with blood on its lips materialized from out of the darkness. Roaring again, it raced for Jaikus. "Trolls!" Lady Kate screamed from the top of the knoll. "Run, you fool!" Jaikus didn't need any more prompting. He lit out of there like a hare with a fox on his tail. Reneeke, brought out of a dead sleep by the troll's cry, stood with sword in hand. He looked to Lady Kate. "You and your friend get out of here. You'll never stand against them." Then raising her arm, a ball of fire appeared in her cupped hand. "Run!" she shouted to Reneeke as she let fly the burning sphere. Reneeke saw Jaikus hightailing it out of there, and he moved to join his friend. As they fled down the far side of the knoll, the sound of an explosion came from the other side. Jaikus was in total flight, and Reneeke tried desperately to catch him. He finally caught up with his friend just as the sound of Lady Kate's painful shriek came from the camp. Glancing back toward the knoll, he discovered they had passed some distance into the swamp, and that their campsite was no longer visible through the undergrowth and trees. Then, the swamp was deathly quiet. Okay, that ends chapter 3, but I got to go for a couple more paragraphs. Okay, so chapter 4. Glancing up from his bedroll, Master Heimel turned sleepy eyes upon the scene unfolding at the edge of the knoll. Troll emerging, new guys screaming, more shouts for them to flee, fireball exploding, and two springers racing for their lives. The troll moved up onto the knoll and made its way in toward the camp. "Do you have to do this every time?" Heimel asked. Taking off the troll head, Charka gave him a grin. "No, but why waste the opportunity?" Lying back down, the apothecary pulled his blanket up over his head. From beneath came, "It's gotten so a man can't even get a good night's sleep anymore." All right, so that was it. I love that scene. They are razzing the new guys, scaring the crap out of them. But yeah, that was another scene that I had in my head when I started this. Charka is a good guy, and stuff like this helps to bond the group together. Although I'm sure Jaikus will be pissed off about it. Reneeke will see the humor in it. But why not have fun on an adventure? Adventures don't need to be this stuffy old. Let's just do the job. Have some fun while they're still on their friends, and there's nothing to worry about. Yeah, I love that scene. I can see myself doing that too. Well, anyway, that was chapter 3. Thanks for being with me. All going good here. I'll do chapter 4 tomorrow. We'll see what happens with Jaikus and Reneeke, who are out in the forest or out in the swamp, thinking that Seward was dead, thinking that Lady Kate, her shriek, so she's dead too. And so yeah, we'll see what happens. I'm almost just trying to go to sleep. All right, well, that's it. That's all I got for today. If you like it, obviously, give me a like. Give me a thumbs up. Apparently, that does a wealth of good for telling the logarithms that people like my content, and that the logarithm should share my content with more people. So the more likes I get, or more thumbs up, the better. Also, if you subscribe to me, click on the bell and make sure you've clicked the top bell, and then you'll get notifications when I post new videos. Anyway, y'all have a good Thursday, and I get biscuits today. Talk to you later. Take care.